All right, this is a video tutorial for a reteach for physical changes and chemical changes. So I'm gonna have you follow along with me as you go through and do this. So physical changes. Remember, you guys, physical changes are any changes that happen to a substance that change the spacing of the particles that can easily be undone, but don't change the identity of a substance. So a physical change doesn't change what a substance is, it just changes the form it's in. So for example, if I ripped a piece of paper, would that change what the object is? No, the object is still paper, but now I've just ripped it into two halves. Or if I boil water, if I take water and start boiling it and it goes into steam, it becomes a gas. Well, it's just gone through a phase change. It's gone from a liquid to a gas. But if I look down at the particles are still H2O molecules. They're still water. And if I do any sort of mixing, so if I mix Kool-Aid, okay, or if I mix hot chocolate, or if I would mix a bunch of jelly beans together, okay, or buttons, that would be a physical change because I would be going through and be mixing them. I could easily separate those. It would take me some time, but I could separate those. I wouldn't change the jelly beans. I wouldn't change the water. I wouldn't change the paper, okay? The flip side of this then is a chemical change. So a chemical change is any change that changes the identity of a substance. It changes what that substance is. So when I rip the piece of paper, I'm not changing what the piece of paper is. However, when I burn a piece of paper, that changes the identity of a substance. It's not easy to undo. It would require a chemical reaction. So the 5 signs of a chemical change that we can see, things that tell us a chemical change happened, are if heat is produced, light is produced, it has some kind of odor, gas gets produced. So like in the baggie lab, when the baggie got bigger, that was because gas filled it up from the chemical reaction, or a permanent color change. So examples of this can be a rotting apple, baking a cake, fireworks, or any kind of burning. So if I have a rotting apple, that has a permanent color change usually. It has a pretty bad odor. Those are 2 signs of a chemical change. If I'm baking a cake, you're going to see a color change in the cake, okay? You're going to have some gas bubbles that makes the cake get bigger, all right? Or fireworks going off. When fireworks go off, you see gas be produced, you see light, you also see heat. Okay, so those are the big differences between physical change and chemical change. To look at it another way, we might look at what happens to the molecules in there. So in a physical change, if I want to look at the molecules or the particles, I might talk about melting ice cubes. So if I filled up a pot with ice cubes, all of those would be in the solid state of matter. We would see all of those particles in nice, neat lines. But when I add heat to those particles and it starts to melt, that creates those particles to go into a liquid phase. You can see that the particles here are both blue. They're still the same color. They're still H2O molecules. But they've just changed their arrangement. They've just changed what form they're in. That's a physical change. I don't change, what the substance is. I don't change the chemical substance. Okay? This is an example of a chemical change and what happens with the reaction. So, for example, a rusting nail. If I have a rusting nail on the bottom here, we can see that that's a rusting nail because and it's a chemical change because there's a color change. Well, here on the left, I have iron, which are these gray molecules, and oxygen, which are these pink molecules. When iron gets wet, a chemical reaction happens with the oxygen in the atmosphere. Maybe your teacher did an example of this with the rusting steel wool. After a while, the oxygen and the iron combine together to make rust. And so we can see that here, that these gray molecules that were on the outside here of the nail suddenly became orange. There's something new. They're no longer iron. They're no longer oxygen. They're a combination of the two, making this a chemical change. I've changed this substance, and the only way to make it go back is by going through another chemical reaction. So this has been a reteaching of physical changes and chemical changes. Go ahead right now and ask yourself these questions. And if you can't easily answer these questions, go back and rewatch the video. Thanks, guys.